Most people really do have a flawed way of thinking about interviews. The interesting part about being a professor is my kids will tell me things like they were told that they're not allowed to ask questions in an interview. Let me tell you this, guys. I've interviewed hundreds of people in my career, and I can tell you right now, if you say to me, hey, listen, I have researched your company, I've got on your website, done a bunch of different things in regards to prep for this interview, I have some questions. Would you like me to ask them now? Would you like me to wait for the end? I'll be like, fire away, absolutely. Hello everyone, welcome to the Now What podcast, episode 36. My name is Glenn Sharp. I'm the president and CEO of Sharp Leadership Development. Well, it is a couple of weeks into summer, and in Cincinnati, it is a real field temperature of over 100 degrees. I made the mistake of playing golf yesterday. Clearly a mistake, because it is brutal out there. I hope you are cool where you are. It's graduate season. All these kids graduated college and trying to get their real job, so to speak, to really go over interview skills. So we're going to do this with a little bit of context because this is a skill. And the context is going to be my stepson, Jack. All right, so Jack just graduated OU, Ohio University. We're really proud of him. He graduated with music education degree. So obviously he's looking for his first real job. And he's looking to be an assistant band director. So that's kind of the context that we'll go with for this particular episode. Obviously apply your particular situation to what I go over with Jack's situation. But one of the things I did with Jack is I sat down with him and we really went over changing the way you think. So this next graphic you guys have seen before, but most people really do have a flawed way of thinking about interviews. So let me kind of demonstrate this for you. You'll notice there's a little icon next to our results cone for the University of Cincinnati. As many of you know, I'm still a professor at UC. The interesting part about being a professor is my kids will ask me all the time for interviewing help. And they'll ask me, hey, Glenn, I have an interview tomorrow. Can you help me prep? That type of thing. But the funny part is they ask me things like, or they really tell me things like, they were told that they're not allowed to ask questions in an interview. And I find that fascinating. Of course, I asked them, where did you get that information from? Where did you get that very notion from? And they're like, a couple of professors told me. Let me tell you this, guys, nothing could be further from the truth. The best part of the interviews is you guys asking questions. I've interviewed hundreds of people in my career, and I can tell you right now, if you say to me, hey, listen, I have researched your company, I've done a bunch of, got on your website, done a bunch of different things in regards to prep for this interview, I have some questions, would you like me to ask them now? Would you like me to wait for the end? I'll be like, fire away, absolutely. Right, so obviously you see on the screen the famous green line versus red line. Most of the work is done up front. You see the famous quote from Sun Tzu, Art of War, every battle is won or lost before it's ever fought. This is also in my book. Most of the work is done up front when it comes to interviewing. And I want you guys to consider that. So the best way to demonstrate this is through the concept of pain points. You guys have seen this in our sales training. Same thing applies for interviewing. So in sales training, it's like, what's the customer's needs? And then you align your product or service to what their needs are. And that's where you stay in the strike zone. In the interview process, it's pretty much the same. It is, what are that company's needs and what are my skills and abilities? And aligning your skills and abilities to what the actual company or department needs. That's where you stay the entire time. So even someone like Jack, who's right out of school, he's learned a lot of things. There's a lot of transferable skills that he can apply, even though he hasn't applied it to the private sector. He hasn't applied it outside of college. And that's what I invited him to really think about, right? So one of the things I want you guys to consider is how you go about doing that. But inevitably, you're obviously going to be asked questions. And I want you to understand this concept here because Jack was particularly interested in, well, what happens when they ask me questions? How do I respond to certain questions? And my thought process and my really response to Jack was, your thinking is totally flawed. I want you to consider why they're asking you these questions. So you'll see a few questions I put on the screen. These are questions that I obviously went over with Jack. We'll go through them one at a time, but focusing on the root cause, which is what the why is, versus the how and the what. So for example, if somebody asks you, what are your priorities if you're selected for this position? Really, what are they asking you? Well, they're asking you, do you think critically? Right? And that's what they want to know. So thinking about that as you're answering the question, proving to them that you do have the ability to think critically is unbelievably important. Right? The second one Jack was asked was, hey, this is a low-income community. Right? How are you going to manage differently in a community like this? What are they asking you? What's the why? Well, really what they're telling you is, we don't have much money. And nor do the students or the parents here. You're going to have to be creative. You're going to have to manage totally differently. So that's what Jack needed to answer. That's the avenue that he needed to really attack. The next question that they asked him was an interesting one as well. In music programs, if you wanted to interview to be an assistant band director, for some obviously rich or high profile programs, they do pre-packaged, they purchase pre-packaged programs. Not every program has the luxury of that. So this particular program asked him, would you rather purchase a pre-packaged program or create your own? Obviously think about the why behind that. If they ask that question, there's a really good chance that they don't have the money to do that. And they want to know whether or not you have the creativity to save them money. Right? So that's different. Obviously, that's a different way to answer the questions. So you would satisfy their question by giving them examples of things that you have done in the past to save money, things that you've done in the past to be creative or thinking critically. That's how you would go about doing that. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about you asking questions, because that's the one thing that I really touted to Jack as I prepped him for his interview, is to make sure that he knows he should be asking questions, because he's interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing Jack. And you can really find out a lot from what kind of questions that you ask and their response to it. So for example, what's your culture? What's the kind of culture that you want to create in 5 years or in this particular program? What kind of culture do we want versus what do we have now? And then where does my program align in that culture? Obviously, you're listening intently for the answer, because obviously that's unbelievably important. Things like, where do you see the company? Where do you see this program in the next 5 years? If they say things like, well, we'll see, right? It's kind of touch and go, red flag. Obviously, going back to the culture question, if they say things to you like, well, we haven't really thought about culture, or it's pretty rough, the culture, obviously red flag. Now, if there are things you can do about it, if you have ideas in regards to how to create a good, strong culture, then obviously you can inject that in there and see what their response is to that. But these are very telling answers to some very pointed questions, and I want you guys to think about that. For Jack, one of the things I asked him was, why don't you ask these guys what kind of support that you're going to be getting in the program? So really, that's a loaded question. That could be money. That could be, am I getting an assistant? That could be, are there parents or teachers or administrative responsibilities or duties that could assist me? In this particular case, Jack was a lone wolf, right? It was all on him. And obviously, red flag, red flag, red flag as he asked those type of questions. And he really got a lot out of them, even though they probably didn't even realize that Jack was absorbing this type of information. So just remember, guys, it is unbelievably important for you to ask these questions. Just like many interviewers are not going to give up some of their deficiencies, and they'll try to hide some of the weaknesses that they have, so will companies. They'll try to hide some of the weaknesses as well. And it turned out in this particular case that this was not a good fit for Jack. They were trying to really exploit someone right out of college, pay him a minimum, and not give him any support. And that's not the job for him, obviously. So he waited. So again, guys, I hope this helps There's a lot to interviewing. My charge to you is to practice, 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 prep with someone. I think the best interviewers really take someone aside and they start talking about what's the hole in their argument, what's some of their weak spots, what are some of the potential questions, and they really practice for the toughest interviews so that when they do it live, it's obviously a lot better. Remember what this podcast is all about. It's wrapped around my book, Now What? If you haven't picked it up yet, it's an awesome way to get one of your employees who maybe is a high potential or maybe struggling in management on a level playing field with their peers. It's the story of me coaching Johnny. Johnny is an amazing mechanic, and because he was so good at turning wrenches, they made him manager of mechanics. Now what? He doesn't possess the skills or abilities to actually be a manager. He's never been a manager before. So this is just chock full of tips, tricks, techniques in order to get Johnny on a level playing field with his peers. So go ahead and pick it up. It's available on Amazon, obviously on paperback and ebook, and I think it'll really help your potential managers or your current managers. Okay, guys, join us for episode 37, where we're going to continue on some scenarios. I have a cool scenario from Ryan in Boston, who I just coached this morning. This was an interesting one. He's really worried about quality in his organization. I asked him, what's your weak link? What's your blind spot? What's the thing that you're worried the most about? He's a COO, and he told me quality. And he was talking about quality in the context of he thinks training is really lacking in his organization. So we talked a lot about that, and we really debated back and forth whether or not it was a people problem or a process problem. Are his training programs effective? Are his people who are training, are they training the right way? Or is it a lack of talent? So I thought that would be an interesting way to go for episode 37. I think you'll enjoy it. There was a lot of cool insights that he had, but a lot of cool techniques that I gave him that I think you can benefit from. In the meantime, I hope you have a great day. Good luck in your management leadership journey, and I will see you in episode 37.